Sarah Barnes, and on behalf of Campbell Company, it is my pleasure to welcome you to First Look Giving USA 2014, brought to you as a service to all of our friends in the nonprofit community. We are delighted to tell you that we have over 500 registered today. Before Peter and Edith begin, I'd like to quickly review some webinar logistics that will be useful, whether you are a new or returning guest of Campbell Company webinars. So first off, to ensure that you have the best webinar experience possible, please follow these tips. Close any programs other than GoToWebinars, of course, that are running on your computer. Call in using a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. Move your cell phone away from your computer. And if you experience any visual issues, contact GoTo at 1-800-263-6317. Today's webinar will last about 75 minutes, and you will earn 1.5 continuing education credits, and that's good for your certification with CFRE International. We will post a follow-up page that will have a link to the certificate documenting the credit earned and the handout. Now, you may be wondering how to send your questions to Edith, Peter, and our panel. You can open the chat section in the panel on the right side, and you'll see an instant messaging window. Type in your question and click Send. They have reserved time for questions at the end of our session, but you may send your questions at any time. And now I'd like to take a moment to introduce Peter Fissinger, who will present the Giving USA findings, and Edith Falk, who will lead the discussion with our panel. Edith, in turn, will introduce the members of our panel. So first, Peter Fissinger is Campbell Company's president and CEO and has more than 30 years of professional experience in institutional advancement. He has worked in a wide range of nonprofit sectors, including education, healthcare, culture, and human services, and on campaigns with goals ranging from $5 million to $5 billion. Peter is a past chair of the Advisory Council on Methodology for Giving USA and serves on the board of the Giving Institute. He is a graduate of the College of the Holy Cross. Edith Falk is a founding member of Campbell Company and is engaged in designing and providing strategic fundraising and marketing counsel to a broad spectrum of clients. Edith has served as president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Chicago Chapter Board, member of the National Board, and dean of the Executive Leadership Institute. She is a past chair of the Giving USA Foundation. And now I'd like to welcome Peter Fissinger. Peter.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. We're looking forward to presenting this data and talking about the data. And we're going to have just a wonderful dialogue with our panelists and with Edith Falk. But let me move forward with presenting some of the Giving USA data, and so we can get to our discussion phase as quickly as possible. To start with an interesting photograph, philanthropy supports so many different things. We try to spotlight some photographs every year. This is Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. So what is Giving USA? We're going to talk about 2013 contributions by both source and recipient type. We're going to look at things like rate of change in giving for the last 2 years, trends in giving, economic trends, and how they impact giving, trends in giving by source, recipient type, volunteering, and nonprofit organizations. I want to remind you that Giving USA is the longest running annual report about U.S. charitable giving, with estimates on sources of giving and amount received by type of organization. It's published by the Giving USA Foundation, which is part of the Giving Institute. It began in 1956 under the name the American Association of Fundraising Council, now called Giving Institute, and is made possible by contributions from firms like ours and other Giving Institute member firms, foundations, and other donors. And we're going to give you access to purchasing this data for your use within your nonprofit organization before the panel discussion is over. I want to let you know that that too, if you purchase the information, supports the research as well. And we're going to be able to offer you a discount today. Finally, this research is this data is researched and written by the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, a leading academic organization working in the philanthropic academic space today. So let's look at philanthropy. $335.17 billion contributed by American, in the United States last year. This is an increase of 4.4% it represents the 4th consecutive year of growth in philanthropy. We've seen a 12.3% increase since 2009, which marked the end of the recession. This is the 4th largest total in history. If you look at inflation-adjusted dollars, the highest total ever was $349.5 billion. And based on the recent rate of growth, in just about 2 years, we will exceed that total. So we're seeing great growth in recent years, and that's very exciting. The one other thing that we like to point out about giving overall, when you look at this pie, is you see 72% coming from individuals, but we also have 8% coming from bequests. And foundation giving is almost 50% comprised by family foundations, which if you add those 3 percentages together, I just want to remind you that individual giving accounts for 87% of giving in this country. Let's look at the history of philanthropy here as documented by this research going back to 1973. What this shows us is that philanthropy tends to grow almost every year. The yellow bars on your screen are years that we have been in a recession, and we either see the growth slow down during that time period, or as in the 2007-2008 era, we actually saw philanthropy decline a little bit, even in inflation-adjusted dollars. We've seen 12.3% increase since 2009, which I said earlier. That marks a slower than average recovery from recession. When you're going back to the mid-50s, when we started this research, we see the average recovery to be about 13.9%. So we are happy that we're going to hopefully be back at the highest level ever in a couple of years, but this has been a slower than average historical recovery from the recession. Let's look at how giving is connected to the S&P 500. The yellow band shows the shows total giving, and the dotted black band shows S&P giving across this spectrum from 1973. And what we see is that giving does follow the S&P 500 very clearly, but it follows it in a more moderate fashion. So the ups are not quite as strong, the downs are not quite as severe. We saw an increase in wealth in the S&P 500 of 29.6% last year. Personal consumption was 3.2%. Personal income was 2.9% increases in both of those. Those are big drivers of philanthropy, and those 3 totals combined sort of add up to how we got to the growth that we got to in this year. One other thing I'd say about this slide that's important is that within this overall illustration, there's a lot of room for individual organizations to do better than average, to keep donors even when the market goes down. And that's part of the reason that the yellow line isn't quite as severe either in the ups or the downs as the S&P 500 is. Let's look at giving by individuals since 1973. This is the single largest contributor to growth in the overall giving numbers this year. Giving by individuals accounts for 72% of the total and added $9.69 billion in new philanthropy in the past year. This is an increase of 4.2%. Looking more carefully at this category, one of the things we see is that itemized giving accounts for nearly $200 billion of the $240.6 billion total in this category. Mega gifts, which are defined by gifts of $80 million or more in this research, accounts for $4.2 billion of the total. We did see a $1 billion gift by Mark Zuckerberg and his wife to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and former mayor of New York City, Bloomberg, gave about $400 million away to various causes. We also saw $272 million in disaster relief from individuals contributing to this category last year. Giving by bequest, increase of 8.7% last year to $27.73 billion. It's 8% of the overall pie in giving. This category can fluctuate dramatically, as is shown at the screen, on the screen, in large part because it's driven by large bequests that may or may not happen in any given year. Let's give some backup data there. Bequests by individuals with assets of $1 million or more totaled $21 billion of the $27.73 billion in this category. That's 76% of the total. The four largest bequests on record that we're aware of are $750 million, $220 million, $180 million, and $120 million last year. The two larger of those four went to family foundations, and the two smaller went to healthcare institutions, mostly. Actually, the $120 million bequest was spread out over a few different organizations in Seattle. One of the things we keep reminding our clients and people on these webinars is that by building a planned giving program, you're strengthening your results over the long haul. And we want to encourage people to build a bequest program carefully and assiduously and stick with it. And over the long haul, it will benefit your organization and the mission that you're supporting. Giving by foundations last year, we had almost $49 billion. That's 15% of the total, an increase of 5.7% over the prior year. Of that total, community foundations increased 10.5%, and independent foundations increased 4.8%. Independent foundations and family foundations combined account for 76% of the total in this category. So they're going to drive the growth or lack thereof a little bit more than the community foundation category. Giving by corporations last year, $17.88 billion. It actually declined about 1.9%. It accounts for 5% of the total. Pre-tax profit is by far the largest indicator of corporate giving, and last year pre-tax profit increased by 3.4%. As compared to the prior year, we saw an increase of 18.5%. So we saw a big spike in corporate giving the year before last. That's why we think that we saw a slight decline last year, even though pre-tax profit did increase by 3.4% last year. There's a very important larger story behind these totals. There was research done in the past year that estimated that in-kind giving may account for as much as 60% of all corporate giving. That's mostly focused in the pharmaceutical and technology industries. And in addition to that, we're seeing over the longer term significant changes in strategies for corporate giving. That there are more along the lines of institutional market strategy than perhaps we've seen historically. So it's not uncommon when we share this data in local communities around the country that it may feel like corporate giving has declined more than 1.9%. Companies may not be giving as much in their home community as they have in the past. They're still supportive in their home communities, but perhaps not as much as they have been in the past. Let's look at the two-year trends here. The overall total was up 7.5% 2 years ago. That's been adjusted up 1% in the data this year, and 4.4% last year, for a total of 12.3% increase in the total of Giving USA philanthropy. Looking at the individual categories, individuals, again, the 8% that you see on your screen here for 2012 was adjusted up 1% from last year's data, 4.2% this year, and for a total of 12.5% over a 2-year period. Bequests, we saw a 1.3% increase last year. That total of 8.7% was actually adjusted up fairly significantly as we were able to document some bequests that came in. It's for a 10-point percentage increase over a 2-year period. Foundations have remarkably grown at exactly the same pace of 5.7% for 2 consecutive years, equaling 11.7% over a 2-year period. And then we see that significant shift up and then slight decline in corporate giving. 2 years ago, up 16.9%. Last year, decline of 1.9% for a total of 14.8%. Let's look at 5-year chunks, and what do we see? Well, I think that if you look at these 4 different categories accounting for the total pie, if you imagine the pie in your mind, what we've seen since 1974 to 2013 is mostly a shift from individual giving into the foundation category. We've seen a significant amount of money transferred by wealthy individuals into their own family foundations, which is set aside for philanthropy for the long haul, can be passed down through generations. And individual giving has remained more constant than it may appear by this slide, and that is mostly because of the shift from individual giving into foundation giving found in family foundations. Now, where's all this money going? Well, I'm going to show you the pie and run through the categories quickly and then give you 2-year totals. And I'm going to turn it over to Edith and our panelists, and we're going to have some more in-depth conversation about both education and healthcare giving. But when we look at the categories, we see religion accounting for 31% of the total, education accounting for 16% of the total, human service giving accounting for 12%, gifts to foundations 11%, healthcare 10%, public society benefit 7%, arts, culture, and humanities 5%, international giving 4%, and giving to environment and animals 3%. Over the 2-year period, what do we see? Not a significant difference except for a big fluctuation in foundations, and we'll talk briefly about that a little bit more after the panel discussion. But you're able to see religion increasing 3.7% over a 2-year period, education, strong growth for 2 consecutive years, 15.6%, human service giving a little bit more modest in their growth, 6.7% over the 2-year period. Foundations way up 2 years ago and coming back 15.5% last year for a total 11.5% growth. Healthcare, very consistent, 5.1 and 6% growth respectively for 11.4%. Public society giving, 4.7 and 8.5% combining to 13.6% growth over a 2-year period. Arts, culture, and humanities, very consistent growth over the last 2 years, 7.7 and 7.8% respectively for a total of 16.2%. International affairs dropped off 6.7% last year and had only modest growth the prior year, so it's actually down 2.9% over a 2-year period. And then environment and animals, similar, exact same growth over a 2-year period of 7.5% for 15.6% over the 2-year period. When we look at the 5-year blocks of this giving by recipients, what we see mostly is slight gradual reduction in giving to religion, and we'll talk about that a little bit again after the panel discussion. And the 2 categories that are growing in its place, for the most part, appear to be giving to foundations and giving to international affairs. And other than that, these categories have remained fairly constant over the years since 1974. With that, with this overview in place, I'm going to turn the conversation over to my colleague, Edith Falk, who's going to talk in a little bit more detail about both education and healthcare giving with our terrific panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And it appears that we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into education and healthcare spaces, in part because these are 2 of the segments that receive a relatively larger proportion of annual philanthropy, and to some extent, although not entirely, healthcare and education are among the leaders in mapping out best practices and setting the trends. But we're especially fortunate to have 2 very distinguished senior-level professionals with long histories in our field joining us today. First, I'd like to introduce you to John Lippincott, who many of you know through his association with CASE, and he's been a panelist on our Giving USA webinars in the past. John is the president of the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, which we all know as CASE, which focuses on alumni relations, communications, fundraising, marketing, and marketing operations for colleges, universities, and schools.
Are we still there, Edith? I've lost you. Bill McGinley.
No, this is John. I lost her too.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally put my paper on top of the mute button, and where did you lose it? Have I introduced John? I'm going to just remind everyone that John is the president of CASE and the longest-serving president since CASE was founded. And then we're good. Okay, let me move on and introduce Bill. And I'm sorry about that, John. And if we've missed anything, we'll come back and pick it up later. Bill McGinley, as many of you know, is until the end of this month President and Chief Executive Officer of the Association for Healthcare Philanthropy, an organization representing 5,000 hospital and medical center executives devoted to fundraising, public relations, and marketing for nonprofit healthcare providers. In addition to 27 years of association management experience, Bill has taught at American University in Washington, D.C. and Mount St. Mary's College in Maryland. Bill is also a former board member of the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University, which was the precursor organization to the Lilly Family School at IU, which is the publisher of the Giving USA report. Next month, Bill will become the new president of Global Education, which is a healthcare philanthropic services firm. So, John, let us start with you. And let me begin by showing the 40-year trend of giving to education that's from the Giving USA research. And education, in the way that Giving USA reports on this, covers much more than the college, university, and independent school sector that CASE represents. It also includes public and private pre-K through 12 schools, libraries, educational research organizations, tutoring services, and student services. So it's a much bigger category. But what this shows is an upward trend over a 40-year period of time, with the dip during the recessionary years that we all are familiar with. But the $52 billion reported here for education, as Peter said a minute ago, is 16% of total giving in the year 2013. The other thing that's really interesting, Peter talked about the fact that education has grown giving to education has grown 15.6% for the past 2-year period. But if you track the growth since the depth of the recession, education has shown a 37% recovery since the recession, and that compares very favorably to the overall rate of growth in philanthropy, which was 12.3%. So, John, you have some interesting information from the CASE Fundraising Index. Will you say a few words about this survey and what it covers, and then comment a bit on the results that we're showing here on the screen?
Sure thing, Edith, and thank you to you, to Peter, to Campbell Company for hosting this webinar. It's a real pleasure to participate in this discussion, especially when the numbers are looking so good. And I want to stress right from the outset that although I'm focusing on education, I'm delighted to see the positive results for all charitable sectors. I think we all recognize that fundraising is not a zero-sum game or a competition. In fact, we all benefit when we see improvements in the climate for philanthropy. So I'm delighted with numbers for all sectors, but as you rightly point out, it has been a particularly good year for education, and as tracked by Giving USA, and I appreciate your note about the difference in populations that we look at. But even looking at the more specific population that CASE tracks, or that's tracked by the Council for Aid to Education through the Voluntary Supportive Education Survey, the numbers are very encouraging. This particular slide shows the CASE Fundraising Index. And the CASE Fundraising Index is something we do twice a year, at the beginning of the calendar year and the beginning of the fiscal year, meaning in early July. And the purpose is really to do a quick reality check with our members about the trends that they're seeing. So we asked them to estimate how they did for the 12 months just completed and to predict how they'll do for the 12 months ahead. And this particular chart is based on the results we received from the survey in January of this year. You can see that people were estimating for the year that ended on December 30th, 2013, that they were roughly up, estimating they were up about 5%, and for the coming year, estimating that they will be up a little more than that. There are a number of reasons why these numbers might be slightly more conservative than the numbers reported in Giving USA, including the difference in populations. The important point is the trend lines are pointing in the same direction, both for strong growth last year and strong growth in the year ahead. So I think it really leads us to the question of why are we experiencing such strong growth? And as Peter pointed out, more than anything, it's the strength of the economy. That coupled with the remarkable resilience of philanthropy in this country. As the economy has improved, donors have renewed their commitment to charitable causes. So as your slide showed, the education sector, the figures are especially strong, 8.9% growth reported for calendar year 2013, which was not only the highest rate of growth of any of the subsectors, it's higher than the normal rate of growth even for the education subsector. As the slide currently on the screen suggests, for the last 20 years, the average rate of growth for giving to higher education has been roughly 5.6%. If you go back to prior to the recession, for the 20 years preceding the economic downturn, that figure was roughly 7%. So by any measure, 8.9% growth is actually quite extraordinary and reason to celebrate.
John, is it fair to say that that giving to higher education has probably recovered from the downturn in the economy and the shortfall in philanthropy during those years following 2008-9? Or are we headed in the right direction?
Actually, Edith, it's not fair to say that it probably recovered. It's fair to say that it has recovered. There's no question. Again, if you look at the figures, education is one sector where the current amount being raised is a record not only in terms of current dollars, but also in terms of inflation-adjusted dollars. So we are now operating at levels above where we were prior to the recession. You also pointed out the 2-year growth rate and the 4-year growth rate. The 4-year growth rate of 37+ percent to education is 3 times that of the charitable sector as a whole. And that begs the question, why has this subsector fared so well post-recession? And I'll offer 4 very quick reasons. First, I think educational institutions have made the necessary investments in their fundraising operations and in developing their professional staff, and have done so for a long period of time. Second, they've been persistent in their fundraising efforts over a long period of time, and they did not let up during the depths of the recession. Third reason I would point to is educational institutions have a distinct advantage in the scope of their activities. So they have strong appeal to donors with a broad array of interests. Whether a donor's passion is healthcare, economic development, arts and culture, social mobility, or some other cause, it's likely that an educational institution will have a program or a project that relates to that donor's passion. Fourth factor is that educational institutions enjoy very high levels of engagement with their donors, since a significant portion of those donors are alumni of the institution. So I'll close then with just a comment about alumni giving, because this has been an area that we've paid particular attention to and that has warranted, I think, some special attention. We've been seeing a continuation of a slow decline in alumni participation rates over the last decade. That is, the percentage of alumni of record who make a gift is trending downward. However, the amount of money that alumni are giving continues trending upward. And this pattern would be true, appear to be true for individual giving in all charitable sectors. fewer donors giving more money. And I would hypothesize that this is the result of increasing income stratification in the country. I would also speculate that among young alumni, the heavy burden of student debt is negatively affecting participation levels. And this is a serious concern since establishing the habit of making small gifts early leads to large gifts later in life.
John, I think you're making a really very important point there, and I hope we can come back to that in our discussion in a minute, but it is an area where we all need to be paying attention, and that is growing our donor base, particularly among younger donors, and building that habit and pattern of philanthropy so that we can continue to see the numbers related to giving overall in this country continue to grow. But let's take a look for a minute at healthcare, Bill, and let me start by reviewing the chart for the 40-year trend in giving to health. And again, this category is much bigger than the category tracked by AHP, although certainly hospitals and academic medical centers are a key part of this. But giving to health also includes health-related research organizations, disease-specific organizations that support research and family outreach, and health policy centers. But as you see here, again, a very strong upward trend, continuous upward trend, with really just a much smaller decrease during the recessionary period than we see in some of the other sectors. But we're looking here at a total of almost $32 billion, 10% of the total giving altogether. And it's about 6% increase over the prior year. So if we look at the rate of change in giving to healthcare generally, since 2009, if I'm doing my math correctly, the rate of growth has kept pace with the overall rate of inflation. It's about 12.9% growth since 2009 compared to the overall rate of growth in philanthropy of 12.3%. I'd like to have you talk to us a few minutes about what you're seeing specifically in the hospital arena and what you're reporting on through the AHP report on giving. Say a few words about the survey and what it encompasses, and then what the results are seeing here. And I realize this is for last fiscal year. It's probably too early to say what's happening, what you're going to report for the next fiscal year. I know you're working on those numbers now.
Good. Edith, I wonder if you could back up to that last slide first. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Edith. Yeah, actually, you make a very important distinction there. When we look at, 31.6 or 0.8, almost $0.9 billion, it is significant that people recognize that from AHP standpoint, we represent the healthcare provider. So it's not the Lung Association, the Heart Association, any of those which are included in this. And ours are primarily the hospitals, the medical centers, long-term care, and hospice. But the trend you see there, that you're in the chart that you're looking at right now, very much mirrors our experience. Now the swings are a little bit wide or bigger, but in 1997-98 you saw a drop in giving in healthcare. You'll see the same thing in ours, or you would if I went back that far. I don't think I did on my chart. But in fact, much of that related to the economy and other things that were going on in healthcare. Also in 2002, you see a little drop there that mirrors what we were experiencing, and of course 2008, which has been reflected here the entire time. Now if you go to the next one, you can leave it on there, and I'll leave the rest to you, Edith. Thank you. But our surveying started in 1983. And we were focused exclusively on that group, hospitals, medical centers, long-term care, and then we break it out even further, as you've seen in other reports that we've done. One of the differences between the Giving USA report and CASE, which are estimates that you're working on, is that we are collecting the active data, the reported data from our members. So, for instance, the data you see here reflects through 2012. We're still collecting it from 2013 because individuals have different fiscal years as we go through it. But even going back to what I've included here, forget 97 for the moment, but in 2002, that drop following the World Trade Center and the economy taking a plunge because of all that went on, we saw the biggest drop in our history in that year. And and yet we had increased quite nicely at the end of 2001. Nice steady growth, as you see, all the way up through 2000. Oh, I should put my glasses on. 2008, and again we mirrored that drop, 2008 with the economy. And for us, one of the complications has been, as providers, has been the Affordable Care Act, the HIPAA provisions that went into effect on privacy regulations. All or both of those interjected an awful lot of confusion and ambiguity among donors about what health care was going to look like. There's still some question in that now. But even through that period, we went through that period where the administration had made some changes in its budgets that it proposed. We had additional confusion until the Supreme Court met and decided that the Affordable Care Act was indeed, could be upheld. So gradually we started to see that confusion wane. The economy came back a bit. I'm not so sure it's as strong as others think it is yet. And in 2011, we had a number overall of about $8.9 billion, and we were virtually the same, up only a little bit in 2012. Now, we saw some characteristics similar to what John was giving you, too. Our individual members who held fast through the downturns of this and the slowing, if they held on to their experienced staff rather than having to lay them off, we found in our surveying that we did later that they came back much stronger. But we had a group of people who were forced to make adjustments in staffing, and when they did that and lost key people, the growth curve coming back, they lost a year's time or a year and a half's time in building back relationships with new individuals. Our preliminary things, the data that we're collecting right now, indicate that we're likely to have a very healthy, 5 to 7% increase from 2012 to 2013, but we don't have all of that together. Very similarly, we have over 75% of donations coming from individuals. That gets stronger all the time. We also face the sense, and we get this in surveys that we do of donors through our members, that there is a sense of entitlement relative to, and even more so now, relative to health care and provider things that are going on, as opposed to, say, education or other things that are going on. We also mirror, and one interesting thing, and I'll hold this off until the end, most of it, but the fact is that in healthcare, we're seeing that those groups that maintain that investment, that are spending at a level of $750,000 to $800,000 a year on expenses, that's kind of a break point for our members relative to getting into or performing among the higher group that we have. Now, of course, we're still representing, and we still struggle with individual hospitals, even if they're in a system compared to the rest of the hospital system. But that's a transition we've been through that adds confusion with donors as well. We're coming out of that very nicely. But we're finding that those institutions that held on to their experienced staff and continued to build relationships, even though there were fewer dollars coming in or pledge times were much longer, they recovered much more quickly. And I'll give you some characteristics of that on the high performers as we get into that. I think, too, one of you mentioned, Edith, it may have been you, I look at the pie chart, and as the oldest person on this panel, and when you say senior experience, that means I'm the oldest person on the panel, it concerns me sometimes when I see, I can go back and remember when religion was 55 and 56% of that pie, and now I think we're, just over 31%. So part of what we're seeing here is a shifting based on the interest of donors, for sure, and some social things that are going on that are making changes there. But for sure, we're feeling much better and much more confident about a significant uptick in the data we collect on 2013. And I think you'll see that that's going to bode well for meeting the needs of healthcare in local communities through our providers. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Very encouraging news. Both of you make very important points about the importance of consistency, both consistency within the internal organization, investment in staff and infrastructure, and consistency in staying in touch with your donors and prospective donors in good times and bad. We talked a lot about that in the years following the downturn in the economy, about the importance of staying in touch even though you weren't seeing the same level of gifts coming in from those individuals. And what both of you were saying is, in the long run, it really did pay off for those organizations who continue to maintain those relationships.
Well, and if I could mention one other thing too, John mentioned one of the strongest things they have, and they're very close to their donors. They have a lot of engagement because it's alumni. And we'll see that in our two strongest categories, where it is university-based hospitals, where, you know, it's the School of Medicine in touch with their physicians, or it's a children's hospital, which has a tremendous appeal, doing a lot of research, providing free care. There's not much overlap in the geographic area they serve, although they pull people from all over. So that's a tremendous focus, but it also speaks to the larger side of things, where they're making investments in their fundraising. They're expending money to raise more money.
I think I mentioned to one of you when we were talking on the phone earlier, often we'll hear from clients a real sense of pride in their low cost of fundraising. And our response to that is often to look at that and say, no, the problem is you're not investing enough in fundraising. So finding that right balance between what's an appropriate investment for the size of the organization and the potential is a key factor.
Right. Edith, this is John. I just want to thank you for making that point. I think it's a critically important point, and I think the whole debate around cost of fundraising, cost to raise a dollar, is putting the emphasis in the wrong area. It really is much more about are you realizing the potential for fundraising for your organization, and you're not going to realize that potential by trying to minimize your expenditures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully we can come back to that in a minute here when we open it up for a broader discussion. But I know we have listeners who represent many other segments of our nonprofit marketplace. So if you don't mind, I'm going to turn the mic back to you for a few minutes more to talk about what we saw happening in some of the other sectors, and then we'll all come back together for more discussion.
Great.
Thank you, Edith and John and Bill. We're back with our pie showing where all the money went last year, giving by type of recipient organization. And I'm going to give a little bit more in-depth comment on the sectors that we haven't already discussed. Let's start with giving to religion, which I think Bill mentioned a few minutes ago. So we had $105 billion given to religion last year, and that's 31% of the total. We actually saw almost the same amount given to religion last year as the prior year, but if you look since 2009, it's actually declined by 2.4%. We believe that this is directly related to lower attendance, weekly attendance, in all kinds of congregations where you gather as a community and everybody is asked to give every week. There's some growing dialogue about what this might mean. Many believe, like Bill, that it just mostly marks a difference in interest among donors. Some are concerned about whether we're going to continue to be getting younger donors in the habit of giving if they're not going someplace every week. So it amounts to some interesting dialogue, but this category has been declining as a share of the total for many years now, and it's actually declined almost 2.5% since 2009. Giving to human service accounts for 12% of the total. It was $41.5 billion last year, which is an increase of 2.2%. Since 2009, we're benchmarking some of these sectors against that. The overall growth was 12.3% since 2009. This sector saw 6% growth, so it's less than overall growth and much less than education, for instance. Some of the larger patterns that we see is that giving to human service will be more stable and sometimes even grow a little bit during recessions because donors will divert some of their giving to organizations that support causes that they think are important in times like that. So helping people who are unemployed or underemployed, helping people who are hungry, helping people who need other kinds of services. And then when the economy strengthens, this sector tends not to grow as fast as some of the other sectors might grow. Human service organizations have a harder time developing individual giving for the simple reason that most of their service recipients are not the same kind of donor prospects as maybe a college graduate or a grateful patient might be, and there aren't as many very large gifts to this sector. So one of the things we recommend to organizations we work with who are human service organizations is to work doubly hard on building an individual giving program. It's more challenging for human service organizations than some other organizations, but it's very important. So 2.2% increase last year for that sector. Giving to foundations, 11% of the total, $35.7 billion. It actually declined by 15.5% last year. This is an area, if you look at the screen, it can fluctuate dramatically. And this is for the simple reason that in some years we see very significant gifts by individuals to family foundations, and in other years we don't. If you remember the screen that showed how giving follows the S&P 500 but not exactly, and remember that wealth increased almost 30% in the S&P 500 last year, we think there could be some big gifts to this sector this year, just lagging a little bit the results that we saw in last calendar year. So we're going to be interested to see the results for 2014, but this past year it actually declined 15.5%, giving to foundations. Giving to health, 10% of the total at 31.86, excuse me, I'm skipping that category. I still have my notes on it. Giving to public society benefit, almost $24 billion, accounts for 7% of the total. It increased 8.5% last year and has increased 27% since 2009. Now this category includes a lot of different organizations, and I made some notes. It covers voter education, civil rights, civil liberties, freestanding research institutions, public policy research institutions, but also importantly, umbrella organizations that distribute funds such as the United Way and the Jewish Federation. So giving to religion does not include Jewish Federation. It's in public society benefit. Freestanding donor-advised funds are in this category, and that accounted for $6.5 billion, or 27% of this total. We're looking to find a way to pull donor-advised funds out into its own category, but it's very complicated because some of it sits here, some of it sits, as John would concur, some institutions of higher education offer donor-advised funds. Many community foundations do, and so the challenge of aggregating all donor-advised funds into one category is complicated, but we are working on it. Giving to arts, culture, and humanities, $16.66 billion last year, an increase of 7.8%. It accounts for 5% of the pie. It's increased 22% since 2009. This is a category that benefits very much from individual giving, and when the economy is strong, giving of appreciated assets, and giving from wealthy individuals, obviously, who might have appreciated assets. It could have been even higher this year, or 2013, if in fact there had been any mega gifts to this category, which there were not. But in strong times, as defined by strong market returns, we do occasionally see mega gifts to this category, and so that could happen this year or next year, and we could see additional growth in this sector. In some additional research that Campbell Company funded a few years ago at the then Center on Philanthropy, one of the things we learned about the arts and culture donor is that, broadly speaking, the arts and culture donor tends to be wealthier than the average donor, more educated than the average donor, and giving to more causes than the average donor. And we believe that when the market is very strong, that this donor type makes larger gifts to arts and culture, and so it tends to do well when the market is strong, and it has suffered considerably in economic downturns. Giving to international affairs, a really interesting category. Look at all that change. Just huge growth from 1988 up until around 2008. But last year it finished at almost $15 billion. That's 4% of the total. It was actually a decline of 6.7%. And going back to 2009, a decline of 16% in this sector. We really see this as a moderation of the overall growth trend. This category covers international aid, international peace and security initiatives, international human rights organizations, and some disaster giving. There was almost $200 million contributed in support of victims of the typhoon in the Philippines last year. We're also increasingly thinking that perhaps we're not capturing all international giving in this category because there are a growing number of American companies with subsidiaries or other owned entities around the world that make gifts directly to organizations from that entity or subsidiary outside the United States, and so it wouldn't be captured here. But overall, this is a growing sector, although the growth is moderated in recent years. Giving to environment and animals, $9.7 billion, 3% of the total, an increase of 7.5%, increased 22% since 2009. Also, this category does garner support from wealthy individuals, and when the market's strong, gifts of appreciated property. There's been some spike in interest in giving in this category, both people who are interested in climate change issues and fracking issues related to energy. And so it's a very interesting sector, although it only accounts for 3% of the overall pie. If you look at giving as a percentage of the gross domestic product since 1973, what we see is it tends to be right in the neighborhood at 2000, and it was right on the nose, or 2%, and it was right on the nose at 2% during 2013. You know, if all of the smart minds in this conversation and the people listening could figure out a way to move this needle, it would have enormous impact on the organizations that we work to support and that we work for. If we could get to 2.5% of GDP, it would be the single most significant statistic of growth that we could imagine throughout this data. Look at the number of 501c3 organizations in the country. It's actually been dropping in recent years. Some organizations did go out of business. There are other organizations that wisely chose a partner to merge with so that they could continue to fulfill their mission and serve the causes that they serve. And the end result is that while it's still extremely competitive when you think about asking a limited donor pool to support your organization, there are fewer organizations with a 501c3 designation today than there were a few years ago. One of the most important indicators of philanthropy is whether people are involved as volunteers in your organization. We're happy to report that the volunteer rate remained above 25%. It's 26.5% last year. It's been as high as 28.8% in this data, 2003 through 2005. But we encourage everybody involved in this discussion today to continue to think of supporting the volunteers you have and innovative ways to engage new volunteers in your organization, because it's the single greatest relationship is those who volunteer tend to give when they're asked to give. With that, Edith, I'll turn it back over to you, and we're going to have a little bit more general conversation with everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And there have been a number of themes that have emerged in our conversation up to this point that I want to circle back to. At the same time, I want to invite our audience to submit questions for us and our panelists. We have a number of questions that have come in already, and I want to get to some of those in a minute. If you have questions about specific details of the report, we will address those separately in a follow-up email. And I see some of you are asking questions about sort of further refinement of some of the data, some of the underlying data that support this. Some of that is available through specific professional associations and some of the reports that John and Bill have shared with us earlier, but it's not, we don't provide that kind of breakdown through Giving USA, but some of that is available through other sources. But you know, Peter, in some earlier comments, talked about the importance of mega gifts, in both in driving some of the numbers that we saw in giving by individuals and also in driving the results that we saw to certain recipient organizations. And John, when you and I were talking you shared with me some really interesting information about the importance of mega gifts to the success of campaigns. And I want to pull that slide up on the screen, and maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in higher education here.
Sure, Edith. This particular slide is from a survey that we do every 2 years on fundraising campaigns. And let me first say, I think campaigns are here to stay. There are currently 48 active campaigns at universities in excess of $1 billion. The largest currently being Harvard's at 6.8 or 6.5 billion. The campaigns are averaging about 7 years in length, and the reason I say that campaigns are here to stay is they are a successful way to ramp up the levels of fundraising. Roughly speaking, an institution is likely to raise something on the order of 40% more during the period of a campaign, during that 7 years, than it would were it not in campaign mode. Some institutions in our campaign survey report giving levels that more than double during that period of time. But the key to success of particularly these very large campaigns, but even more modest campaigns, is indeed major and mega gifts. And that effect has been growing over time. I can remember 10, 15 years ago, we used to talk about the 80-20 rule, that 20% of the donors would give 80% of the money, and then that shifted to the 90-10 rule. Well, if you look at this slide, if you're in a billion-dollar fundraising campaign, it's now the 96-10 rule. That is, 96% of the money is going to come from 10% of the donors, and to me, even more dramatically, 83% of the money is going to come from 1% of the donors. And while there is a slight variation based on size of campaign in smaller campaigns, the effect is still there, and I think very dramatic. Now, what I want to stress is that this does not suggest to the people listening to this webinar or to anyone interested in undertaking a fundraising campaign that they should focus all of their efforts on that 1% or on that 10% and ignore the 99 or the 90. Quite the contrary. Most of those who make these mega gifts to universities today made mini gifts in the years immediately following graduation. So if we don't create that habit of giving, and we talked about this earlier, among a new generation of donors, we will pay the price for that 30 years from now. So while there is no question that the major donors and mega donors will determine the success of the current fundraising campaign, it is going to be the small donors who will ultimately determine the success of future fundraising campaigns. So we need to pay attention to both. The other thing I would say is I think this continued trend line toward fewer donors making major gifts reinforces the point I was making earlier about the effects of income stratification in the country. And then just one last point regarding the cultivating the habit of giving among a new generation of donors. I would commend to your listeners a piece that Campbell Company actually commissioned in the May-June issue of our magazine Currents, which has to do with creating student philanthropy programs and the importance of investing in those programs and the payoff from investing in those programs.
John, thank you for bringing that up. We all certainly know the importance of continuing to build our donor base and looking at ways to engage younger donors. There was an interesting story in the Chronicle of Philanthropy online just today that talks about technology and the access to technology for millennial donors. I'm just trying to pull it up right now. I mean, I'll get my hands on it in a minute. But also, too, you talked about, Phil, you talked about some of the success factors that are critical to a successful fundraising operation. We talked a little bit about staff size and total fundraising emphasis, but on the we have here, you also have an emphasis on major gifts activity.
Right.
You want to comment on that as well?
Sure, happy to. And I really have to mirror what John is saying about the full range of opportunities that appeal to the diversity of our donors and how essential that is. And over the years, I really strongly believe that our executives in the healthcare sector are getting better and better at this, but they struggle with some things that we don't find, we just find a longer investment, a longer sense of culture of philanthropy in university and schools and such than we do in healthcare, perhaps because of that entitlement, perhaps because of third-party payers. There's a whole slew of things that are going on about that. And I think it's important, one of the things that we did where I still get frustrated when I talk to volunteers or others that are involved in their stress and their emphasis on cost to raise a dollar. And we heard before, all that really is, all that speaks to is efficiency. And if all you're about is efficiency, you lose opportunity to really raise the dollars that you need to stay in the communities. All these dollars stay in the communities for our health care. So one of the things that we've done to get to these success factors is back in the 80s, I started to do this and trying to establish or get somewhere with standards of reporting, and I candidly gave up in the late 80s. Came back to it in 2002, 2003, and we finally have published a standards manual for reporting and communicating effectiveness. And the three key elements that come even before this are the cost to raise a dollar, which is an important element. That's something you want to monitor. You don't want to know where you are. But the other is simply the return on investment. And that really speaks to the opportunity, what you're doing with the dollars you're raising. It's not the efficiency, but the effectiveness, the impact we're able to have in changing lives, doing things that are making communities healthier, and then the net fundraising dollars. But through that and the consistent reporting that we've had now, where we're clearly looking at a consistency in how you report income and capturing the expense that is so imperative. We're getting beyond the days where I'd have a donor or one of my members say to me that his adage was, give to us, every dollar goes to the cause because I have no expense. I have 42 staff people, but I have no expense because that's on the books of the hospital. Well, that's very unrealistic, and of course it's not true. So the focus on return on investment is key. And what has come out of that, and what we've seen in the last 3 years in particular, consistently, and through the downturn too, was an added emphasis on major gifts activity. And what John was saying is that the rest of this is absolutely important. It has to occur with the annual campaigns, with the special events, all those activities appealing to different interests of donors. But the capital campaign, it was so frustrating to watch some of our capital campaigns that, people would walk away from and give a sigh of relief and say, let's never do that again, where they'd walk away from major gift activity or opportunities. But what we've seen in the recent years is the success factors relate to those of our high performers that have an emphasis on major gift activity. They have a clear way of doing research on donors, of putting together appeals and proposals that work for them. They also have to pay attention to those annual donors because most of these major givers, in our experience, come from $1,000 donors. Okay? Then the second element is staff compensation, and it really speaks to staff experience. But we'll find that compensation for the staff is much higher, a good bit higher in these high-performing institutions. The consistency of staff, the long-term relationships that they're able to build because they're staying there is tremendously helpful, and the higher skill level and experience that relates to that compensation is key. The staff size, I don't know if you have that slide in there, where with us, John mentioned the variety of ways to give, the appeals to the donors. And we look at 4 or 5 of those things, and the high performers have at least one staff person dedicated to each one of those areas. Those that are not in the higher performers don't have some people, or have some of those that don't have a dedicated staff person, at least one. and that ranges from anywhere from 1 to 5 people in those areas. So the staff size certainly has something to do with it. It is that investment. And then the total fundraising expenses, which relates to the second and third one here, and even the added experience we're bringing in with major gift officers and the expertise that they have. So we did find that in the groups that we've worked with, you're looking at 750,000, 800,000 is a break point where you're seeing those of the high performers are making that kind of investment. Now, that's not to say that those in areas or smaller hospitals, or they're just starting off, it's not, you know, if you have 1 or 2 staff people or 3 staff people in that situation, it becomes, what's my next move? What's my next investment? And if you put this in terms that CEOs of hospitals and CFOs of hospitals understand through our reporting and the standards reporting, the light bulb goes off. They begin to understand it, and they're willing to invest in it if we're able to speak their language in the ratios and the returns and everything else that they're looking for. But we have found these 4 are key success factors in our high-performing group, and it's something to work towards, certainly.
Sylvia, thank you. These are really very helpful findings, and I think they really do apply across all organizations, even if the numbers aren't quite as large in some of the other sectors in the nonprofit as they might be in the hospital and healthcare arena. But I think a really important point is that the consistency in the program, that investing in your staff so that those staff are there to build long-term relationships with your donors is absolutely key, and it's really short-sighted to well, I guess it's the longer-range benefit of the organization to create an opportunity for that individual to remain with that organization, and putting it in terms of the impact on dollars raised and the good that can do in the community. Well, it's an important message for the CEO and the CFO to hear.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And even on the lower end, like I'll say to some of our people, I'll say, well, how often do you run the annual campaign? And they look at me like, well, it's an annual campaign. We do it once a year. The high performers are running the annual campaign 3 and 4 and 5 times a year. And they're appealing to different segments of their community and their donors for support. So, you know, we find that also in the children's hospitals, university-based hospitals as well. So you can make small steps even if you have limited resources to begin.
You know, both of you have talked about the importance of engaging the next generation of philanthropists. John, you referenced specifically the alumni. Bill, you talked about that as well. The article that was in today's Chronicle is Lifestyles, Attitudes, and Technology are Shaping Millennials' Giving, the notion being that they have instant access to information, but they're migrating away from institutional affiliation. So what are your thoughts about how we counter that trend?
Yeah.
Well, Edith, I'll jump in on that. This is John. Couple of thoughts. One, as I suggested earlier, certainly for a college or university to take advantage of the fact that you have the students there on your campus and have the opportunity to create that pattern of giving, even giving to other organizations and other causes, but establishing that tradition of philanthropy while they are with you on campus. So that's one piece of it. Now, that's much easier to do for colleges and universities because you do have that captive audience. There's no question that it's also going to be a function of the effective use of social media for fundraising. And I would stress that while it is a growing part of philanthropy. Case has done a study with 2 other organizations, M. Stoner and Duron Consulting, that shows that more and more institutions are deploying social media. They are having greater success. By far the channel they use most often is Facebook. But the successes are modest. Only 10% are raising more than $100,000 a year through social media. And it represents less than 5% of total giving for most institutions, what they raise through social media. But the point ultimately is social media is more about, as with all online giving, more at this stage about donor acquisition than dollar acquisition. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think the other opportunity is through things like crowdfunding, I think the sentiment that you're picking up on and that article was picking up on is that the younger donors want to feel like they're giving directly to the thing that they care most about. In fact, I think there's a general trend toward what one person has described as disintermediation, that is, taking the middleman out of the equation. I think creating opportunities for younger donors to make their gift directly to the specific purpose that they have in mind, say through a crowdfunding initiative. And I'll give you a simple example. Appealing to donors to support a bike sharing program on a campus. Those young donors are less likely to make a general gift to the annual fund than they would be to contribute to a crowdfunding project that would support that bike sharing program.
So that raises a really interesting question. Will these individuals who are supporting these crowdfunding activities eventually become institutional donors, or will we be looking at a totally different environment 10, 15 years from now? Who knows, right?
Well, I think the important thing is that they be donors. If they're not donors, then it doesn't really matter what vehicles you make available. But if they are donors, then you can begin to look at how do we effectively tap into their interest and their particular mode of giving. And I think we should look at it as opening up opportunities, not closing down opportunities.
Sure. And I think, Edith, in our end with the healthcare providers, our alumni are the grateful patients and the families. And we've seen a growing emphasis on that and appeal to that because they have experience with healthcare. On the social media side, we're nowhere near as successful. However, that's changing. And strangely, it's changing with the older category of people who have more time and are learning how to search things and go through things, and they're giving to individual programs. They're also supporting things health-wise that are affecting them that they learn about through the internet and the web. But the younger side of that for the hospitals is not getting on board as much. That outreach from the hospitals is more for active things that are going on, programs certainly, and because the hospital hasn't touched them quite as much in their lifetime. However, part of the key is getting to know who that family is, and the younger family that is treating Dad, for instance. That seems to be where we have some good success.
And I think that also speaks to the importance of stewardship. We see tremendous fall off in first-time donors. They give once, they try it out, and they don't come back again. But the research shows if you can retain a donor for 2, 3, 4 years, you probably will continue to grow them as a donor over time. So we don't talk enough about stewardship. I don't think. It's how you thank that person and keep that person engaged after that first gift, so that they are open to other invitations to support the organization down the road.
Mm-hmm. John, this is Peter.
And to that point, Edith. Okay.
Sorry, this is Peter Fissinger. I wanted to ask John you a quick question, if I could. And it's sort of combining some of the things that we've been talking about. When you look at, for instance, the cost of raising $1 in the higher education world, it's difficult. First of all, we all agree that investing is more important than anything else, but effectiveness is very important as well. It's difficult sometimes in that atmosphere when working with board members to find consistent benchmarking data. I'm curious how you feel a good alumni relations program is rightly included or not included in the cost of raising $1. To Bill's point earlier, when you look at successful organizations, they have strong major gift programs. When you look at successful institutions of higher education, especially in the percentage of alumni who support the annual fund, you see very robust alumni relations programs. but they may or may not be included in the cost for raising a dollar. And the case for investing in alumni relations can be challenging for organizations that don't have that participation or support. So that's kind of a sweeping question, but I wonder if you might be able to address it a little bit.
Well, it's a very good question, Peter. In my mind, there should be no question that for an educational institution in determining the cost of raising a dollar, that you would, in fact, factor in the costs of the alumni relations program. The challenge comes in what portion of that alumni relations program you should attribute to the fundraising activity. The flip side is those really good alumni programs are programs that value alumni in all the roles that they play in support of the institution. Roles as an advocacy force, roles as a marketing team as part of the student recruitment effort. So you do get into a fairly challenging debate about what portion of the alumni budget should you allocate to the calculation on cost of raising a dollar, because the alumni program should be investing in activities that have to do with things beyond the fundraising role that alumni play. CASE does something called the Advancement Investment Metrics Survey, and we have tried in there to account for all of the factors that go into raising a dollar at an institution, and we have some good benchmarks in there, I think. But I just come back to the point all of us have made, which is it depends so much on the maturity of your program and the sophistication of your program and the size of your staff in determining whether you're making the appropriate level of investment. And quite frankly, most institutions, most organizations are underinvesting. They're leaving money on the table.
Right. Yeah, and I think to add to that too, I know the debate, as we've established reporting standards for revenue and expense, and on the expense side, we've captured, indirect fundraising staff, direct fundraising staff, overhead, cost, and we're very specific about our definitions that are included in all that. And part of that is because the only accounting course I ever understood was cost accounting. But these elements are they're directly related to the activities that you're undertaking on a cost basis, and they need to be included. And the consistency is tremendous. It's very much like the CPA and how they do their reporting relative to the fundraising. But it's tough for some people to get their heads around it because when they come out locally and say we had a great year, it only cost us 10 cents to raise a dollar. Well, wonderful, but how much money did you leave on the table because you couldn't create the opportunity? And why are you scared to say we're investing 28, 30 cents? Our return then is 70 cents. If every time I gave you a dollar, or every time you gave me a dollar, I gave you 3 back, when would you stop? Well, this is what's happening, and we need to be realistic about it.
And there's been a lot of interest in this whole notion of cost of fundraising as I'm looking at the questions that have come in from the audience, and a comment, maybe even a challenge to all of us, and it's from one of our participants: could CASE, AHP, and Giving USA join together to publish standards and recommendations for evaluating fundraising success and the most critical drivers of it? That would provide terrific benefit to staff and boards of nonprofits. So maybe something
Sure.
for us to think about moving forward here.
Yeah. Well, I'd give you a starting point because, we started, I think CASE did that very nicely in their capital campaign. Is that what you called it, John? The capital, what is the reporting there? The summary reporting. Yeah, capital stuff, campaign. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what we went through was just that, Edith, and we tried to embrace AFP, the Urban Institute, and when they gave up on trying to report expenses, we said forget it, and we did it ourselves for our own sector. But this could very easily roll out to across the board, okay? But the major stumbling block was they backed away from trying to define what expenses, what levels, and we just couldn't have that. We needed to have a much better picture, a much truer picture in the reporting. So if you want to do that, Bill is fading off to black here, okay, on Monday the 30th. But start looking at our standards manual, and you can use that as a good basis for the debate. It took us 3 years, a lot of bloodletting, a lot of interesting meetings, yelling and screaming, but we were able to pull it off. Now we just need to get people to embrace it.
And Edith, I think that the questioner's point is extremely well taken, and I think there is definitely still work to be done in this arena. I can give you average numbers from case reports on fundraising. That roughly speaking, we're talking $6 for every dollar invested. So $1 to raise $6. But I hesitate to emphasize those averages. What we really need is a much more sophisticated, nuanced approach to this, where a given organization can input its current levels of performance, its current levels of investment, and determine where that potential is if they were to make a significant additional investment beyond the base level that they currently have.
Right.
So we assume that you're going to charge your successors with doing exactly what you described. So as I said at the beginning of the conversation, Bill, as you know, is stepping down from his post and moving into a new area for him at the end of this month, and John will be stepping down from his post at the end of January. So I have the unique benefit of asking both of them as they reflect back on their many years in their respective organizations here, and as they move forward into a new roles in their lives. What words of wisdom would you share with our participants in the webinar, some of whom are just starting on this path, some of whom have been on it for a while? Bill, let's start with you.
With me, you said, Bill?
Yes.
I would say, once you know, start with the end game, okay? Start with what you're out to achieve, and then never, never, never give up, okay? There are times when you'll go left or right, or you'll slow down, but never give up on those elements that you feel are absolutely essential. Really, we're looking at leaders in this sector, and the people that are really leaders are much more than just fundraising experts and executives. They are really taking organizations to new heights, and in order to do that, you can't give up on what your values are and what your goals are. Now you've got to get them squared away, but you're thinking of the end game and working backwards. It's kept me mentally stable over the years by doing that.
Great advice. Thank you. And John, what would you share with our listeners?
Edith, as I reflect back on almost 11 years in this role, I would say most of the changes that I've seen have to do with scale, but not with the fundamentals. We have new tools at our disposal. We talked earlier about social media in the fundraising arena, but it really still comes back to relationship building. I don't think that has changed. As I look ahead for what's going to affect fundraising in the future, I think it has less to do with the profession itself and those issues of scale and the tools that are available to us. I think it's going to be much more about the external factors that impinge on the particular sectors that we represent. Bill, for example, was talking about the impact of the Affordable Care Act on the healthcare sector and fundraising for the healthcare sector. I think in education there are things going on, disruptive influences like the for-profit universities, the MOOCs, online education. I think those are the things that are going to create change that everyone is going to need to adapt to in their respective sectors, not because the fundamentals of the fundraising profession itself have changed.
Well, that's great. And I think without even knowing what the questions have been from the audience, because I don't think they're showing up on your screen, just on mine, we've covered just about all the topics that are burning on people's minds. It has been a distinct privilege for us to have both of you, John Lippincott, Bill McGinley, join us today as part of this panel discussion. We wish you both all the success as you move into the next phases of your lives, and we hope that next year you'll listen in and be part of this again. So thank you. I'm going to turn it back to Sarah Barnes for some closing out remarks.
Thank you, Edith.
Thanks, Edith.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your valuable information and insights today, and thank you to everyone who joined us. Before you do leave us, we have some additional information to share with you. As you'll see on your screen, to obtain Giving USA 2014 information, you can visit givingusareports.org/2014. A complimentary executive summary with key findings is available, and you'll have the option to purchase the entire report as well. You can use the code GI1430 to receive 30% off any Giving USA product. If you register for today's session, you'll receive reminders of our upcoming webinars. If you're sitting with a group and you're not on our email list and you want to sign up, please do so at our website at campbellcompany.com. And one last reminder, you can view today's webinar on our website later today. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you again in the fall when we start our 2014-2015 webinar program. Have a great day and great rest of your summer. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.